Or a bad choice for talk that's being recorded.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, well,
Okay,
unfortunately.
well, welcome everyone. This is Social Aspects of Information Security. And hello to everyone watching online. Thought I'd start off with, who am I and why, what gives me the authority to be talking about this. I've been in InfoSec for a number of years. I've done information security research since high school, and have a passion for teaching and doing research. I don't know everything. I'm just a geek with time on my hands, but I try to do my best. So, what this talk is about basically is how our social interactions and our joint social psychology dictate how we deal with information security, how we react to information security, and how these traits can be used against us in the context of social engineering, which I'll explain more about, and how we can defend ourselves against malicious attacks, people trying to harm us and get us to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. So what are some principles? So what are some principles of security? Well, some principles of security are, one aspect is confidentiality. You don't want, you want to keep data from being given to people that don't have access to it, and they don't need access to it. You also want to keep data from being modified, except by those who have access and permission to modify it. And you also want to always have the data available, but only by those who are approved to access it. So let's get into some of the psychology behind people's thought process when they think of information security. Well, the sad thing is that a lot of people don't think about information security at all. They just go about their business and they give out lots of information that perhaps they shouldn't. Potential customers call into a bank and they may ask for certain information that a receptionist or someone may think is innocuous, but is in fact a key piece of a puzzle that could potentially do great harm to an organization, even though an ordinary person wouldn't think it would be all that big of a deal. And and what knowledge people do have of security is limited. Many people don't have, as I said, many people don't have security on the forefront of their minds. And they don't understand how people can be manipulated. So what are some ways, I've been talking about this, so what are some ways that people can be manipulated? Well, someone pretending to be an employee of a company could ask a ordinary receptionist or something to run a command on a computer. And as far as a receptionist knows, she's just using a computer, when in fact, that command could be to create a new user and have them have root privileges. So obviously that's very bad. Obviously that's bad, and it's many little things that social engineers and attackers use to bring down, to penetrate the security of an organization. And I mentioned social engineering. Well, what is social engineering? And social engineering is basically what I've been talking about. Using psychology and using social interaction manipulation to get people to do things under false pretenses that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And Kevin Mitnick being one of the most famous examples of this. He'd been doing it for quite a number of years before he was arrested in the mid-90s for his electronic activities. But you can look him up on Wikipedia if you don't know who he is. I really don't have time to go into his story right now, but that's the.
Or you can buy his books, they are not that expensive.
Hmm?
You can buy his book, it's not that expensive.
Yeah, exactly. He's written several books, most of which are very good, and they're not that expensive if you want to learn more about him. So, but people want to be helpful, right? People want to be helpful, kind. If someone asks you to do something, especially if it's a coworker or colleague, you're more apt to say yes than you would if it was just some random person asking you something off the street. And this is a technique that a lot of social engineers we use, is they try to establish a rapport, and they try to get you to think that they're your friend and they're someone that you can trust, and when in fact that probably isn't the case at all. And speaking of emotion, there was a study that came out of Case Western just today that showed that if you were more analytical and you're more logic-based and thought-based, then your centers of emotion are turned on. So you're not thinking about emotions, you're thinking of pure logic. And vice versa. If you are in an emotional state, you're thinking from your emotions, from your feelings, then your analytical side is also turned off. And you are not able to think with what we would consider to be logic and reason. And I thought that was a very interesting study. So that's definitely, I'll post a link to that somewhere. And, because it's really good reading. So, but most of us, I'm sure, we believe that we are, I don't know very many people that would willingly say, yes, I'm gullible, yes, I'm manipulative, yeah, yes, I'm easily manipulated, We don't like to think of ourselves as being easily manipulated, so that's what we do. We say to ourselves and to other people that, yes, I'm less susceptible to being manipulated than the average person, but psychology and most people's experiences do not bear this out. That most people are just as easily to be manipulated as anybody else, which is kind of a sad reality, but that's that's how it is. So as I was saying, a lot of ways that people manipulate this trust after after people gain this trust, oftentimes they'll say, hey, I need help, or can you do something for me? And a lot of times it'll be something innocuous, something that may seem innocuous, like I said. Some bit of information that is only known to company insiders, but is actually very important. And I mentioned getting people to run a command, you know, that sort of thing. Oftentimes what social engineers will do is they'll claim to be a fellow employee of an organization, and they'll say, oh, I lost my key card, I forgot my key card, can you let me into the building? Or, you know, oh, I'm Joe from maintenance, I'm here to, you know, fix things. And usually most people won't give them a second glance, but you don't know that they really are who they say they are, you know. In my, actually in my dorm building, we get that a lot of times, where people will wait outside of the back door and wait to be allowed entrance into the building, even though most of us aren't sure if they really belong there or not. If they're just visiting a friend, if they live there or what, a lot of us really don't know, but they just waltz in. And because most of us are busy doing our own thing, we don't really have the inclination to stop them and say, hey, who are you, what are you doing here?
I have a similar example. When I was working at a scientific lab with IBM, they had all kinds of doors which opened with gate cards similar to the card we have here. This was about 20 years ago. And everybody was supposed to use their own gate card to get in. However, very often, you would have somebody come in behind somebody else. And usually the assumption was either that they'd forgotten their gate card or they had the gate card, but what was the point of letting the door close when they were so close together, blah, blah, blah. And who knows how many people came in who didn't have a gate card at that time. Now this was a concern that was actually interested in protecting their proprietary information, and yet people were walking in like there was no tomorrow. By the way, a prime example of social engineering is the following. Somebody in a noisy environment calls up a secretary and says, Margaret, is this Margaret Smith? Yes. Apparently there's a problem with your computer account and I can't get into it. Could you give me your password? 9 times out of 10, Margaret will give me the password.
Yeah. Without any checks, without any, you know, who are you and what do you want to know? They'll just hand over the crown jewels, like, you know, without any second thought whatsoever. And the name for that technique that the name that Kevin Mitnick uses for that little procedure that Dr. Rossum was describing is called tailgating, where you follow an authorized user into a building, and he described several stories where he was able to get into areas that he should not have had access to, but people had assumed that he was an authorized user, so they just let him in without a second thought. And there are a lot of different techniques that social engineers use to do their thing. You could write a whole book about different techniques, and lots of people have. And so I can give references later to those of you who are interested, but I don't really have time to go into that now. I could spend the whole rest of the talk doing just that, and not really get anywhere, and that would be boring to all of you. And I'm not going to do that because I respect you as well. So, but what are some practical considerations that ordinary people can use to protect themselves against obvious attempts at information gathering, emotional manipulation, that kind of thing? Well, one of the things is always verify what someone tells you. Never assume that they automatically have the right to know about what they're asking, to know what they're asking about.
Or that they need it.
Exactly, or that they need it, They may be asking for some bit of information that is completely irrelevant to what one would think would be their normal job responsibilities. So even if someone is a developer or even a secretary, anybody should always be willing to challenge the person asking for the information and say, why do you want to know? Who said you're authorized to have this information? So, and someone may say, oh, I'm this person. I'm, like I said, I'm Joe from maintenance, or I'm from IT, or whatever. Well, that's another thing that you shouldn't just let slip by without checking on it. Are they really? Oh, okay, well, if you're really from IT, I'll check on that, give me a number, and I'll, give me a number where I can reach you, I'll call you back. Don't let other people walk all over you and try to strong arm you out of information. And I see a lot of corporate cultures where because people want to be helpful, because they don't want to rock the boat, they'll just give people the information out of, with the assumption that they're being nice and they're being helpful, they're being, but as a corporate culture, you should be able and willing to rock the boat and to challenge what people may say. And as far as technology goes, never run commands on a computer that you don't understand what they do. You should teach that to all of your secretaries. Have them never run commands without understanding what they do, unless they give someone a backdoor or a root shell or something. And if that happens, well, game over. The attacker wins.
And by the same token, don't let anybody else touch your keyboard.
Exactly, yes. Exactly, yes. Don't let anybody else use your machine or use your credentials to do something. Because then not only does the attacker get what they want, but because they use your credentials to do it, then you're in hot water as well.
One key point to share, which is important here. Nobody, absolutely nobody, will need your password for anything whatsoever.
Yeah, your password is your password, and nobody else should ever have access to it.
System administrators have a way to get into an account without your password. They don't need to know it, they don't know it, but they have a way of getting into an account and doing whatever they want, as if they had your password without needing it. They can even change your password behind your back without you having it.
Yes. Yes, all of this is absolutely correct. System administrators, technical people, they will never need an ordinary user password, and they don't. Because if someone forgets their password, they can reset it, as Dr. Wilson said, without anyone needing to know, So But those are some of the basics of what social engineers do, how they do it, and you know, and what are some steps people can take to defend themselves against people trying to manipulate them socially. But I wanted to touch on some other practical considerations that some people may or may not be aware of. Because I didn't want to, you know, I wanted it to be a broad talk. I didn't want to just talk to all of the technical people that I assume would know this already. I wanted to, you know, go over some things that non-technical people would probably need to know too. So one of those things is how to choose good passwords. And what does a good password consist of? Well, good passwords shouldn't just be one word. It should be a passphrase, typically between 8 and, say, 15 characters. You can have them be longer, but that's the optimum range. And you should never, you should have something that's easy to remember but hard to guess, and never ever anything out of a dictionary, even a non-English dictionary, because yes, those exist too, and foreign language password dictionaries do exist. So don't pick a passphrase out of a dictionary, because that's one of the most common attack vectors, is because so many people are so bad at picking good passwords and good passphrases that many dictionaries and other things exist to crack passwords. So how do we improve the cultures of organizations to say, you know, to train people so that they know right off the bat what to do and how to make that acceptable in a corporate culture? Well, some practical things are, even though small bits of information, like I was saying before, small bits of information, even though they may seem entirely inconsequential, can have a big impact. And like I said earlier, always be afraid to challenge authority. Just don't think just because you're a junior developer or someone that you can't question what someone is telling you. And always be thinking. Never let yourselves run on autopilot. Always have your own social, your own social thinking in the back of your mind, and always be on guard, because the human element is truly the weakest link in security, and always will be, because we're humans, we make mistakes. So, and another thing is, for goodness sake, don't run outdated software, because outdated software is usually so full of security holes that it's not funny. Like Java, the Java runtime, for example. A 0-day vulnerability was published last month, and a week after Oracle patched it, they found another one. So you had two or three 0-day vulnerabilities lurking in the Java, just in the Java runtime. Never mind anything else. So, if you don't know what a 0-day vulnerability is, it's software security exploit. So, for goodness sake, don't run outdated software. So, and phishing is another thing that most of you are probably well aware of. Phishing is, trying to get you to give out information via email or instant message. And a lot of this stuff is old hat. Old hat to you guys, I hope. But I wanted to explain this to other people that may not have the technical background that we do. So, some things you can avoid being victim to this are never click on links in email. Even though you may get an email that may say it's from a trusted friend, a worm may have overridden, gotten into their address book and is sending email as them. So always double check your email and double check your links and make sure that, the person really did send the email that it's saying, that it says it is. So, and always check the URLs of any links in an email, because oftentimes what phishers will do is they'll set up fake websites that are designed to collect credentials from people, but and then forward you to the real website. So always be aware of that. And another thing I want to touch on is defending against malware. Run a good antivirus. Microsoft Security Essentials is a good one if you're on Windows. ClamAV is a good one, I think, on Linux. Run AdBlock Plus in Chrome or in Firefox and use ad blockers, because oftentimes malware will hide, JavaScript malware will hide in pop-ups. So run a pop-up blocker, and don't run software that you don't know where it came from. Or if you really have to, run it inside a sandbox. The program is called Sandboxy that has a driver that monitors the Windows kernel to check file I/O and that kind of thing, to monitor for malicious activity. So that's the basics of social engineering and how people, some things that social engineers use to try to extract information from people and how to defend against it. But like I say, it's a really big field, and research like this is going on all the time. I could spend hours summarizing the latest research, but I hope this gives you all a taste of this, what I think is a rather exciting field of information security, and that's pretty much it. And I'm happy to take questions. If there's anything that you guys feel that I should have covered that I didn't.
I'll have more to say about all this topic and more in the course next semester.
John, what is your scheme for generating, what's your method for generating passwords?
I actually have them just generated randomly. There are apps, there are web apps where it'll generate passphrases for you that are totally random based on criteria you specify.
See, I was hoping you would tell me how to generate your password so that I could guess your passwords.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that because mine are totally random, so that's that.
Well, I'll tell you how I generate my password, but I won't tell you my password either. What I do is I think up a few words in a few different languages. Then I misspell them in a way that is really bizarre, I mix in a few punctuation marks, change the case in some of the letters, and that's my password. Oh, I also put in, added a few digits for kicks and whistles.
What he's saying is his default password is lead hacker.
Huh?
What? Nothing.
So, and, there are things called KeyPass, where it's like a password database, but it's encrypted. So all you have to remember is one password, and then you have access to all of your other passwords. Because,
Doesn't that also add a single point failure though? Like if you have a weak password for that and they figure out that password, or they keylog that password, then you've lost all your passwords.
Absolutely.
yes, that is something to be aware of.
But usually, if you have stored that on a machine, that you have another password too, that already makes two passwords to try to guess.
Right. So it's increasing security while being still accessible.
And it's always a point of diminishing returns. In other words, you always have to think about what are you risking with the password. When you visit the internet, there are tons of sites which ask you for a password, where really what they're protecting with it is really minor. Some sites really ask you for a password to get in, just so that you can issue some comments. Whereas some sites actually have something to protect, for example, Amazon.com. So use a password that's sufficiently distinctive for those sites where you really want to protect something. And for those passwords where it doesn't really matter, you can even use the same password all over. One trick that I've seen a lot of people use is use a common password, but then prefix something from the site to all the password. For example, if you use Mixit for a password, which I'm not, of course. Or for example, for Amazon, I would use AMXit. For my bank, if it's if it's 2/3, I would use 2/3 Mixit and so forth. Okay.
Which is a good general encoding scheme for passwords.
So about changing the password, because 10 symbols, how often should change it to assume that you're gonna be secure as far as no social problems,
Yeah.
social engineering?
Yeah, because if you always have the same password, then that also becomes a single point of failure.
So how long the 10-digit, 10-character password would last before somebody can break it?
Well, it depends on the complexity of the password, but generally, 10 digits. If you're naive about it and it's just a standard alphanumeric, and numbers, depending on the hashing algorithm, you can crack it in a week.
How about those websites that blocks you after 3 times and then you have to call and reset it?
Yeah, that's a good, that's a good feature.
So do you still have to worry about resetting it once in a while, or that
Right.
should be okay?
Right, I would still change it regardless. I don't think I would let that, let an account lockout be your sole source of security. I would say change it, I don't know, every 6 months or every year. But don't let it,
Again, it depends on how valuable this information.
yeah.
Well, if it locks on itself after a few tries, why should you have to worry, because it's locked?
The problem is that even though it's locked, there might be other ways to get at that password. For example, it may be that the file that contains all the encrypted password gets leaked somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, the web form, that, if it's a website, the web form that we'll log in with could have a SQL injection vulnerability, and and somebody could inject whatever username and password into the password database that they wanted. So that's
For example, there are so many different ways to log into, to use your Flashline name and password, that there are many different ways you can check it out, going round robin over them. So even though it may block you after 3 failed tries, it will block you after 3 failed tries here and here and here and here and here and here and here, so that we're really talking about 40 or 50 tries. And sometimes those don't really block, but they reset after after a certain time.
yeah, totally.
Also, sometimes it's not only your information that gets compromised when your account gets compromised, it may be the whole computer. There is something called escalation of privilege. When an attacker gets into a computer, they will often not just get your account, they will usually try to then get administrator privileges from your account. And that is often not hard.
Yeah, especially if the attacker knows his target well, and knows something about the organizational layout, what kind of operating systems they're running, that kind of thing. The attacker may have all kinds of exploits that aren't necessarily patched against that they could use for escalation of privilege.
Is there a way to see if somebody's trying to actually get your password and trying to use it somewhere, just trying out your passwords, logging into the places?
Oh yeah, I know Windows and Unix have login auditing, so system administrators can see what usernames and passwords were used over a certain time period, and if they see lots of different tries with the same username or common usernames like administrator or root, then they know that it's probably a attempted break-in, and they should be more vigilant.
In fact, every single login attempt is usually logged,
Yeah.
which makes for interesting reading sometimes. You get all kinds of attacks from all over the world.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that they get the address ranges of whole companies or of whole countries for their firewall, and they block them. So I've known companies and I've known individuals who have blocked the entire country of China from ever being able to connect to them.
Well, actually, I'm worse. The machines I use, they only allow logins from the university, period. If I want to log into those machines from elsewhere, I go to the university and then from there go to my machine.
Yeah, so that's another layer of security you can have, I suppose. So,
That makes me really wanna try to send a message to Roy by embedding it in a bunch of different, like, logging with hi, and then with Roy, then how is your day? So when they look at the login accounts.
I don't think he'd appreciate that too much.
yeah, I don't know that he'd like that very much. But, so we should give it a shot.
He wouldn't know who to contact, so.
He might,
Yeah, he might, yeah.
Not
he might. Actually, it was very interesting. The other day, we watched a couple of 300-page printouts coming out of the computer science printer. And in the beginning, it was very hard to figure out where they were. Jason finally figured out which computer they came out and which user they came out from. It took him a few hours to figure it out, but he found out. So don't meddle with them.
But if I do it from a computer I don't normally use, connected to a network that doesn't require authentication.
There's lots of open computers in like the library.
Oh yeah, I can just go over there. No traces.
He'll still be unhappy. But at least he won't be able to do anything about it. Of course, you could also do that with the university computers. They are also very big at security, believe me.
Well,
There's a university security office, cybersecurity office,
yeah.
and they actually run a security audit on all machines of campus at the beginning of the month.
It's interesting to note, they must not run that on the computers in the bookstore, in the student center.
Because the bookstore does not belong to campus.
Right, because those computers, the user that's logged in has admin privileges and can create more user accounts with admin privileges.
You do this?
Yeah, but the thing is, those, I don't believe those actually belong to campus.
They don't.
The bookstore is an independent entity
Yep.
outside campus.
You know this from experience, do you?
Someone I know may have tried it.
Ah.
Apparently succeeded.
Yes.
If they were part of campus, they'd be breathing down their noses real quick.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, they give us a hard time a lot.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens, like I have in my bank statements, that they charge $1 for iTunes, and then there's 128 or 150 iTunes bought for $1, and then the bank calls you all of a sudden and they tell you this is a security breach, and they start fixing it. I wonder what happens there and who suffers, and how they figured out that I didn't buy those iTunes and things like that.
It's just a suspicion. I went through that on Monday, in fact. I bought a copy of OpenSUSE in German. And that same day I decided to order pizza for the contest course on the same credit card. And when I ordered the first time, I got a text message saying there was a suspicious activity on my account, I should call the number. And I thought it was a pizza order. But the pizza order was denied. There were a couple of times I called that number, and what happened was, they had actually blocked my account because it was, they suspected something was fishy because I had ordered something from Germany.
Right.
But it was, usually it's just a suspicion. Oftentimes, they're on the money, sometimes they're not.
So actually some
Something that